The moment he knelt down, the room seemed to forget how to breathe. A single father with tired eyes and a threadbare jacket lowered himself to the polished marble floor of a luxury hotel, surrounded by indifference, noise, and power, and in that small, quiet motion something invisible cracked open. No one knew his name, no one knew his story, and almost no one had noticed the three small children standing alone, until those three words changed everything. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of human decency, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this matter because people like this exist. The hotel was the kind of place Daniel Carter never entered unless he absolutely had to. Crystal chandeliers spilled light like frozen waterfalls. The air smelled faintly of citrus and money. People moved with confidence, shoes clicking in sharp rhythms, eyes fixed forward as if looking too closely at anyone else might slow them down. Daniel stood near the edge of the grand lobby, one hand gripping a worn backpack, the other holding the fingers of his 7-year-old daughter, Emma. She leaned into his leg, quiet and observant, her gaze drifting toward the spectacle unfolding near the elevators. Everyone was there for the same reason. The CEO of Halcyon Systems, one of the most powerful tech companies in the country, was arriving for a private conference upstairs. Executives in tailored suits clustered like birds of prey, assistants murmured into headsets, and security scanned the crowd with practiced suspicion. Cameras flashed, whispers rippled. It was a world Daniel had never belonged to, and one he had learned to survive outside of. He was there because the hotel was hosting a free community coding workshop for kids in the ballroom next door, a rare opportunity he couldn't pass up. Emma loved computers the way other kids loved cartoons. Since her mother had died 3 years earlier, Emma's curiosity and gentle resilience had become Daniel's reason to keep going. Being a single dad meant juggling 2 jobs, late nights, and constant worry, but it also meant learning how to see small miracles where others didn't. As the crowd shifted, Daniel noticed them. 3 children, identical in face and height, standing a few steps away from the velvet rope. They were dressed neatly but simply, holding hands the way kids do when the world feels too big. Their eyes were wide, not with excitement but with something closer to confusion. Adults brushed past them without a glance. A security guard stepped around them as if they were furniture. No one asked where their parents were. No one slowed down. Daniel felt a familiar ache settle in his chest. He knew that look. He had seen it in Emma's eyes on her first day back at school after the funeral, when other parents didn't know what to say and chose to say nothing. The triplets stood there, invisible in a room full of people trained to notice everything except what mattered. The announcement came then, rippling through the lobby like a wave. The CEO had arrived. Phones lifted, smiles sharpened, people leaned forward, hungry for proximity to power. In the sudden surge, the triplets were pushed gently but firmly aside, their hands breaking apart for a moment before rejoining. One of them stumbled, caught herself, and looked around as if expecting help that never came. Daniel didn't think, he just moved. He guided Emma to a nearby bench and told her to wait, his voice calm even as his heart began to pound. He crossed the marble floor, past polished shoes and impatient sighs, until he reached the children. Then, without hesitation, he knelt down so he was level with their eyes. The noise faded. The lobby shrank. And with a softness that came from years of bedtime reassurances and scraped knees, he said the 3 words that would echo far beyond that moment. He told them they were not alone. The children stared at him, startled by being seen. Their shoulders relaxed, just a fraction. One of them nodded. Another clutched her sibling's hand tighter. Daniel stayed there, grounding himself on the cold floor, aware of curious glances now turning his way. He asked if they were okay, if they knew where they were supposed to be, if they needed help. No dialogue carried across the room, but something human had interrupted the machine. A woman in a tailored suit noticed then, her brow furrowing as she followed Daniel's gaze to the children. A security guard approached, irritation flickering before confusion took its place. The triplets' names were checked against a list. Suddenly the air shifted again, this time with embarrassment. These were the CEO's children. Not props, not accessories, just kids who had wandered ahead of their detail, unnoticed because they weren't loud, weren't demanding, weren't important enough on their own. The CEO emerged moments later, a tall man with silver hair and a reputation for brilliance and distance. He took in the scene, the kneeling stranger, the gathered staff, his children standing closer together than before. Something crossed his face then, something unguarded. He stepped forward, not with the authority that bent rooms to his will, but with the urgency of a parent who realized how close he had come to losing sight of what mattered. Daniel stood slowly, ready to apologize, ready to disappear. He was used to being told he didn't belong. Instead, the CEO reached his children first, crouching to check their faces, then looked at Daniel with eyes that searched rather than judged. The crowd waited, breath held again, but this time it wasn't anticipation, it was recognition. The rest of the morning unfolded in quiet ripples. Daniel took Emma to the workshop, his mind still replaying the weight of the moment. He expected nothing to come of it. Kindness, he had learned, was often a one-way street. You gave it because the world needed it, not because it would pay you back. But later that afternoon, as Emma excitedly explained a simple game she had coded, a hotel staff member approached Daniel with an invitation. The CEO wanted to speak with him. Daniel almost declined. Pride and fear wrestled in his chest. In the end, he went, holding Emma's hand the entire way. The conversation that followed wasn't about gratitude in the performative sense. It was about recognition, about how easy it was to miss people when you move too fast. About how a man who ran a global empire had somehow failed to notice his own children standing alone. The CEO learned about Daniel's life, his jobs, his daughter's talent. He listened in a way that suggested he wasn't used to doing so without an agenda. Over the weeks that followed, small changes began to stack into something larger. Emma was offered a scholarship to a private tech academy funded quietly, without press releases. Daniel was connected with a training program that led to a stable position he never thought he'd qualify for. None of it was framed as charity. It was framed as opportunity, as belief. More importantly, something shifted inside Daniel. He had spent years shrinking himself to survive, moving through the world like an apology. That day reminded him that his presence mattered, that kneeling down for someone else did not make him small, it made him human. The story spread, not because Daniel told it, but because someone else had watched and needed to believe in something good. Online, people argued about motives and power, but beneath the noise, a quieter truth settled. 3 children had been seen. One man had chosen compassion over convenience. And a room full of people had been reminded that worth isn't conferred by titles or attention. As time went on, Daniel returned to that hotel once more, this time as a guest speaker at the same workshop. He spoke to kids who felt invisible, to parents who were tired, to anyone who needed to hear that the smallest choices could bend the arc of a day, a life, a future. He never dramatized it. He never centered himself as a hero. He simply told them that noticing mattered. If this story is touching your heart right now, if you feel that tightness in your chest that says something important is being remembered, please take a moment to like the video, share it, and subscribe. Your engagement helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. And before the ending, I want to ask you something special. Please comment below with a single word that represents what this story made you feel. One word can carry a lot of weight. On a quiet evening months later, Daniel watched Emma sleep, her laptop closed on her desk, her dreams full of code and possibility. He thought about the triplets, about how they had smiled more easily the next time he saw them, about how the CEO had learned to slow down when his children tugged at his hand. The world was still hard, bills still came, grief still lingered, but woven through it all was a thread of connection that hadn't been there before. In the end, nothing magical had happened. No fairy tale resolution erased struggle or loss. What happened was simpler and more powerful. One person noticed another. One act of kindness rippled outward, touching lives in ways no one could have predicted. And somewhere in a bright hotel lobby, the memory of a man kneeling down remained. A reminder that sometimes the most important words in the world are the ones that tell us we are not alone.